Okay, so first of all, thank you all for joining us today and welcome. I'd like to introduce myself, Esther Carlsen, and we have Sam Thompson and Ryan Sullivan also from Bench today. Sam and Ryan will be taking you through a majority of the content today, and we're also joined by Jessica Miles, who's the country manager of Integral Ad Science, who along with Sam will take us through a few case studies we've completed with her and her team around contextual targeting. We'll do that towards the end of the session. So before we kick off, I thought it'd be good to outline the structure and the premise of the session today, and also to let you know where you can access the content and all of that kind of stuff. So as you will know, the topic we're focusing on is around the changes to targeting as a result of all the restrictions that are happening around the ability for us to track consumers in the digital space. And there's a lot of noise and a fair bit of confusion as to what we will and won't be able to do. And I don't know about you, but it's pretty hard to keep on top of it all with so many different opinions out there, so many businesses trying to navigate themselves and us through these changes. So at Bench, we've been working on what all of this means for us and for our customers. And that really is the focus of today, the practical stuff. So what you can do and how you can get started. It's not actually all doom and gloom. It's just about really sort of getting under the hood of what's out there and making a start. And that's what today's session is all about. We'll be running through some slides and we'll send these to you along with a recording of the session towards the end of this week. And in regards to Q&A, there is a Q&A functionality that we've enabled. But given we've only got 45 minutes, fair bit of content to get through, feel free to ask questions as we go through, pop them in, and then we will revert and respond back to you in the next 24 hours. On that note, don't make yourself anonymous, otherwise we won't be able to contact you. And then also, just so you all know, any other questions or if you need to get in touch with us, we've set up an alias, which is workshop@benchmedia.com. That's workshop@benchmedia.com. And just feel free to drop us a note through there. And then finally, given the importance of the topic, we're offering all of the attendees today a one-on-one cookieless auditing session. And this will be a 30-minute scoping session where we look at exactly what you're currently doing, the setup, your objectives, your data strategy, your media mix, and then kind of provide you with recommendations to help prepare your business for the future of targeting without the cookie. And so to book those sessions, stay tuned until the end of the session, and we will share a link on how you do that. And with that, I'll hand over to Ryan and Sam.
Nice. Thanks, Esther. What Esther was saying there is totally correct. Like, there's been loads and loads of confusion and a lot of conflicting content out there about, what may or may not be possible with the upcoming privacy changes. What we wanted to do was kind of look at everything through a bit of a different lens and focus on the opportunities. So what we want you to be taking away from today is a bulletproof post-cookie audience targeting playbook. What Sam and I will be doing is taking you through some practical examples of what you can do now and actually what will continue to be possible in regards to consumer targeting. And look, it's a fair call. We acknowledge that the changes won't just affect targeting, they'll also affect measurement, they'll also affect attribution. But today, what we're focusing on is that post-cookie consumer targeting piece.
Awesome. Cheers, Ryan. All right, so the first place to really start is by taking a look at the consumer impact. So we need to take a step back, and the first thing to flag is that all of these changes are really in reaction to consumer data privacy and security concerns, and that to me is a really good thing. What it's done is it's led us to a real privacy-focused web experience. Now, there was global outrage when it became clear just how for sale everyone's data was, and then the various nefarious activities that it was being used for. Governments and organizations really started to act, and to that point, think your GDPRs and your CCPAs. And that then led to a bit of a focus on the value exchange, and realistically, this communication job wasn't done very well. There's always been quite a lack of understanding between consumers accessing free content online and the publishers collecting and then reselling that consumer's data in return. Consumers have always expected content to be free to them in the open web and have never really been educated on that value exchange and what it means. So what now? That's led us to more consumer control. And by that, we mean we've now got the ability to opt out of data sharing for advertising purposes and opt out for targeting and tracking. And that will likely lead to a lack of personalization when it comes to an individual's web experience, as well as the ads that they receive. So the real drawback there is that most users don't understand that opting out isn't actually going to remove ads from your online experience. It's just going to ensure that what you receive is less tailored and less relevant to you as an individual. Now, I'm sure we'd all agree that it's a good thing to improve consumer understanding of that trade-off between free content, sharing data, and obtaining personalization, so that we as an industry can all continue to maintain the health of that open web experience.
For sure. And look, Sam has covered some major changes there. And as he mentioned, the changes are good for consumers, no question there at all. And look, yes, while we are all consumers, for the purpose of today's session, we're marketers, right? So let's take a quick look at the impact it's going to have for us professionally. And I've kind of covered three major points here. Now, the big one is targeting. So the call outs really for targeting are scale and granularity. Without cookies, there's going to be less identifiers for tracking consumers. Now, while cookies, weren't a perfect solution, what they did do is cover those points quite well. The second part is testing. Okay, so, and this is going to be a big focus for today. It's going to be a massive focus for everyone moving forward. We're all going to have to rethink our cookie-led approach to finding prospective customers. And the last part is around data collection. So this is making sure not only are you collecting your own, but you're also accessing other providers' first-party data sources. This is going to become way more important as we move forward. So look, just recapping here, these are seismic industry shifts, but we need to look at them as positives. As a consumer-led industry, we should be actively encouraging solutions that actually push us to provide cross-media and cross-platform strategies that are, that have consumer privacy at the core. So with that in mind, let's start building your new targeting playbook.
All right, so the first thing to cover off is that there really is a bit of a mindset shift that needs to happen for a lot of marketers. I think if we kind of step back and if we're really honest with ourselves, we'd probably agree that cookies were the easy option, and the fact that they're now going brings with it opportunity. So there are a number of great cookieless targeting solutions that are available to us right now. So what we'll do is we'll go into these in a little bit more detail, and we'll look to bring them to life for you a bit and make you comfortable with how and when to use them. And this will form what the rest of the workshop will cover. So top line, how do we navigate? First up, we've got first-party data. We're not so much talking about your own first-party data, but we'll be looking at publishers and platforms with first-party data that we can leverage to target. Next up, we've got our more traditional third-party providers and how they can continue to remain relevant in a cookieless future. We've then got non-cookie-based targeting solutions, which will effectively be twofold. We'll take a look at contextual targeting, which has been a bit of a buzzword in recent months, and we'll have a look at other cookieless data providers that are out in market as well. Last but not least, we'll take a look at channels that have been less dependent on cookies since they've been available to us to activate within different buying platforms. And then after that, Jess will share a great case study with you regarding their contextual targeting solutions. Now, a reminder that the key throughout this is to ensure that you are diversified in your targeting strategies moving forward so that you can really look to achieve a mix of data accuracy and scale for your campaigns. Now, as we've mentioned, we want you to be able to take with you a playbook of some of the things that you can do with us now to prepare yourself for that cookieless future and be at the forefront of the options available to you as a marketer when it comes to prospecting consumers. But in saying that, it would be amiss of us not to touch on the importance of the first-party data side of things in terms of retargeting your known users as well. And the point that I want to quickly raise here is that first-party data is going to become ever more important. So brands that really have a first-party data strategy will likely thrive when it comes to moving forward and running marketing campaigns. So developing a strategy, ensuring that your data is collected with consent, and then using that for performance marketing tactics or personalization will absolutely go hand in hand with efficient budget usage. So first-party data has always been a key to success, and that's not really going to change. So now that we've kind of quickly covered that off, we'll move on to the exciting stuff, and that's the prospecting. So first up, we'll look at unlocking the power of your first-party data, looking into, as I mentioned, both publishers and platforms.
Awesome. Cheers, Sam. So the first one we're going to cover here is publisher first-party data. I'm going to call out, this isn't something new. We all know that the brands that are up on the slide there, but this is going to become more and more important in the future. These guys have been here for a long time and they are here to stay. So I guess the one thing to note is over the last few years, these publishers have been investing a lot of money in developing their own data collection strategies. So you'll all have experienced this yourself. So this is when you're being asked more frequently to log into platforms to access the content. BVOD, for example, the explosion of BVOD has only accelerated that. And like this is really for the purpose of their data collection. They want to know who you are, they want to know the content you're interested in, your location, your demos, everything. And on top of that, what they've been doing is they've actually been working with other data partners, people like, you know, Ticket Tech, people like Red Planet. And what that's doing is it's really helping them scale out and enrich their own data offering. So I guess a couple of things to call out, right? This is super premium data and it's only going to get better, really quality. This is first party, this is logged in, verified user information. Coupled with that, you've got the premium quality content. So this is written by network journalists on premium publisher sites. So really, really high quality stuff there. The only real things to keep in mind is because of that, it gets expensive. You know, exactly the reason it's premium quality means that it gets priced accordingly. So when you're buying this publisher, access to these publishers in silo, what can happen is there can be a lack of scale. But then let's say you want to try and combat that scale and buy across multiple publishers. What ends up happening is it becomes an inefficiency in the actual workflow as well. So this kind of buying, as I said, it's not new. This isn't anything new. It actually takes us back to the kind of direct media buy days. But now in a programmatic world, this is your PMPs, your private marketplace deals. The question, I guess, would be, like, why would you not just buy direct with these guys? I guess the main reason is when you're buying programmatically, across all of these publishers, what it allows you to do is optimize across them all, as well as frequency cap across your entire campaign.
Cool. So what Ryan's kind of just covered off there is that really super premium publisher and premium audience solution with a potential drawback of scale. And one way that you can kind of really help to scale out your executions is by activating across platforms that have their own first-party data as well. Now, I'd imagine that these platforms don't really need a huge introduction. Just like publishers, platforms in the exact same way package up their first-party data as well as the media that they can access that we can then use for marketing purposes to plan and buy our campaigns. And the one consistent that I find in these platforms is that they were built to offer a consumer service. They were not primarily developed as a media buying solution. And therefore, you've got this known value exchange between the consumer and that service, which really allows them to scale out their rich data collection strategies. So some of the things that are super valuable to consider here is that, A, it's super accurate data. So often to the point of an email address being that signal that's used. You've got super scalable data due to the sheer volume of people that use these services. And it's super cost efficient to buy. It usually comes free with the platform that you're activating in. Where I would sort of suggest that you watch out a little bit is that the data is very much siloed to the platforms that you're activating in. And that effectively creates what we affectionately know as the walled gardens. So for example, there, a marketer is unable to use Amazon's data on YouTube. They put the walls up and you've got to play within those walls. So just to unpack each one just a little bit, Google, as we know, they collect their data from services such as Gmail, Search, and Maps, and that data is generally really highly targeted, interested, intent-based data. You've then got Verizon, in which the majority of their data comes from the likes of Yahoo Mail, as well as website data from their owned and operated network of publishers. So think the likes of Yahoo Finance. They also have location and content data through that publisher network, carrier data, and purchase data as well. And what I like about that is it's looking through a completely different lens to Google. So while it's still good for that highly targeted, interest and intent-based data, it's across a completely different environment to those Google users. So you might use it for the same types of reasons as you would use the Google data, but across a completely different audience base and a different environment as well. You've then got Amazon, which is a really interesting one. To be fair, it's one that I've looked into a lot recently, and it's really continuing to scale in the Australian market. They are, as we know, they collect their data from a range of different sources. So you've got the Amazon Marketplace, you've got Prime Video, you've got Audible, Twitch, IMDb, a range of different sources there, and that's allowed them to really scale out highly targeted product viewing data, purchase data, demographic data, and life stages data. And as there's so much purchase and intent data available there, you might think that it should be used for e-commerce driven strategies, which it can, but let's keep in mind that it's also great to use for a whole bunch of other different reasons, such as life stage campaigns, demo-based campaigns, and both brand and performance. Moving on to Facebook, they obviously collect from the Facebook platform. They've got Instagram, there's Messenger there as well. And that ensures that the data is predominantly social, but it also lends nicely into really hyper-targeted location, as well as scalable demographic and interest-based data sets. And then finally there we've got Amobi, who have a super strong and scalable asset locally with Optus data, and then throughout Southeast Asia with the Singtel data network. What that's allowed them to do is scale out those super highly targeted telco data campaigns, demographic data, financial, which could be used for a range of different types of campaigns. Now, one call out to make on this slide here is that you'll notice that there's a couple of platforms missing. We've got the Trade Desk isn't there, and Xandr isn't there as well. And while the Trade Desk don't have any first-party data that we can use for targeting, they are leading the industry and charging forward with an open identity solution. And then when it comes to Xandr, we'll wait and see how that plays out and how that moves forward, given their recent acquisitions and data footprint outside of Australia. Now, if you're working with just one of these platforms, you can absolutely leverage their unique value and their data, but you very much limit yourself to what you can access within that platform. So the real value of this comes from an agnostic approach, which allows you to do two things. First of all, it allows you to plan campaigns using the best platform or combination of platforms and data assets based on what you're trying to achieve. As well as that, there's the point around testing, learning, and optimizing between platforms that are driving the most success for your business outcomes. Now, that kind of covers off the first-party data driven side of things when it comes to targeting solutions. So now we'll sort of step back and take a look and get into the weeds of these other cookieless signals.
Okay, so most of us will have had some experience with third-party data providers in the past. There's a few brands up there: IOTA, Experian, Lotame, Oracle, Bombora, and so on. And you'll have seen them across the media plans. The overall assumption is that third-party equals cookie, and that these providers will somehow die off because we associate them with cookie consumer targeting. Look, that's not the case. These guys have been planning for this cookieless scenario for some time. Look, yes, I think it's fair to say the majority of their scale came from cookies, right? But that's not the only signal that they've been collecting. Over the last while, they've been collecting, like the actual segments of themselves have been created with, yes, cookies, but also mobile ad IDs. You've got first-party cookies, hashed emails, contextual information, research data, survey data, and so on, okay? And I guess what that means though for marketers, for media planners, is your standard off-the-shelf interest and intent segments, they'll all still be available, right, in some form, but they just won't be based on cookie data. And there's a kind of a trade-off there. So what might actually happen here is the segments themselves will probably have less scale, which is fair to say, but what might actually happen is that they'll become more accurate. So this all comes back to kind of what we're saying throughout this entire workshop is about testing. Moving forward, you should be testing these third-party segments alongside the first-party publisher and first-party platform strategies that we've just covered. Now, in addition to the third-party providers that we've just mentioned, we're going to take a real look at contextual targeting. Now, contextual has been the hot topic in recent months. There's no denying that it's going to play a massive part in the future of targeting. But I think what we want to do here, let's actually unpack what it is, who the main players are in the space, and then let's look at some kind of practical, solid use cases.
Awesome. So as we were building this, we were talking to Jess at IAS about contextual targeting, and she mentioned a conversation that she was having with a journalist about the difference between contextual marketing, contextual targeting, behavioral targeting, and this kind of got us thinking. First of all, it's super interesting that we're having these kind of conversations now. And secondly, we kind of found that these terms can be somewhat interchangeable. You're both marketing to and targeting consumers within a contextually relevant environment, and that can very much be twofold. So by twofold, firstly, you've got your physical contextual marketing. So let's imagine you're an outdoor clothing brand such as North Face. You decide to run an outdoor ad campaign in and around the ski resorts or when the weather gets cold. Now that's physical contextual marketing and targeting. You've then got your digital contextual targeting, which is the exact same approach being taken, but to digital environments. And in this case, it's using the content or context of a web page that someone is viewing to then determine which ads to place. And realistically, both of them are about the right ad for the right brand in the right environment. Now, while this is not new, again, by any stretch, it's the technology that we're using that's become a lot smarter. So we've got contextual semantics engines now that allow for us to not only target based on the content of a page, but allows you to also do that in a brand safe environment. So for example, the keywords selected to target against might be right for your brand, but they could be in a negative context. So remember all the negative cruise ship content created about the Ruby Princess? Without semantics engines there, ads for Carnival Cruises could have easily appeared alongside all of those negative articles. Now, the bigger players in the market are obviously IAS, you've got Teads, you've got Grapeshot, and you've got Double Verify. And while most of them can be accessed off the shelf in major DSPs, I find that it's the direct relationships with them that will help you yield the most value. One of the things that I really like about these solutions is that they really are a good proxy for audience data. So they're super privacy safe, they don't use any audience data, and then when you add in that there's been increased sophistication beyond the basic keywords, you're starting to really shine a light on how valuable it can be. Some of the things that I would think to watch out for, or as I step back and think about what some of the watch outs might be, there's actually not a whole lot of downside. So potentially, if you really want to sort of put a line there, you could potentially say there's a little bit less personalization. So your creative needs to speak to a group of users and potentially a little bit less granularity. But really, as I've thought about it more and more, there doesn't really seem to be a campaign type that would not benefit from some form of contextual targeting moving forward. And to that point, I really suggest that you get comfortable with using and testing these segments in your campaigns, because they're going to become ever more important as that cookie deprecates. And yeah, as I said, really excited because Jess will share a case study shortly and what we've learned together while we as a business have been testing them out. All right, so now we'll quickly scoot on here to Ryan's favorite. We've got geolocation.
Cheers, Sam. Yeah, it's my favorite. Geo-targeting, look, the reason I like it, it sits out on its own, in my opinion, right? It's a completely unique view on consumers because it's based on movement patterns. What you're doing is you're building and creating audience segments based off of where consumers go and how often that they go there. And people that aren't that familiar with geo, these segments are created using signals from background app data on your mobile phone. These providers capture the information about where you are, where you've been, and then they package it up so you can activate it across media. Two main ways I reckon you use geo. First one is proximity, and this is targeting users based on where they are at that time. So like a good example for that would be, you're a beer brand and you want to target people that are physically at a live sporting event. The one that I think is probably more commonly used is behavioral. So this is targeting users based off of where they've been and the frequency that they actually visit those locations. So it could be a university, for example, wants to target people who attend a competitor uni, so they would geofence the competitor uni campus, that sort of thing. The reason I like it, as I mentioned, it's quite unique, but it's accurate. It's device ID based, so it's consistent down to that user. It's also accurate down to a really, really low radius. So a lot of brands will actually use it for offline attribution when you're trying to get down to that store level accuracy, which I think is really, really cool. The data is really fresh, is a real selling point in my opinion. Because these devices are being pinged on a regular basis, I think it's 200 times a day, the data is super, super fresh. And very lastly, as I mentioned, you've got that online to offline attribution piece, which a lot of brands really want to tap into. I guess a couple of things to call out, limitations maybe, is you need to watch how you use it because it can lack scale. The more niche you become with your locations, the less scale you're going to have. And obviously with the IDFA changes, this is going to potentially probably impact scale even further. We just kind of don't know what that's going to look like yet. There are honestly so many use cases for geo. I mean, you could do this, I'll list off a few. Like you can use it to reach, for example, commuters on their daily commute to and from work. You can use it to target CBD workers within the actual business districts, sports stadiums for sports fans, gyms for health conscious fitness fanatics, supermarkets for grocery buyers, unis and schools for students and parents, airports for frequent travelers. Obviously, you can use it for point of purchase, as I've mentioned. You can even use it, which is a wee bit sneaky, for competitive targeting. But again, it's a really good strategy. So we'll use the gym scenario again. You could be fitness first, and you want to geofence all the Virgin Active gyms to capture their customers, something like that. So similar to what Sam was saying, so some of these segments are available off the shelf, but to really get the full value, you do need to get a direct relationship with one of the providers out there. The last thing I'm going to call out here on geo is there's actually an even more basic way to look at geo, and that's your own customer data. So start to look at where your high value customers live and then start dialing up those locations. You can even start to do a little bit of strategy, a bit of research into lookalike locations as well. Look at how your audiences are made up and the demos that are involved in there, and start to target similar locations based on that. Super simple, but look, it's effective. So to wrap up on this one, so that's your two first party solutions. You've got your premium placement publisher, you've got your scale with platforms, you've got your contextual targeting, that's giving you your brand safe, contextually relevant placements, and then you've got geo, right? So that's giving you your pinpoint accuracy for consumer movement targeting. Okay, sweet. So that is us. We've looked at where you're going. Let's take a look at what you're buying.
Nice one. I'll scoot through this one and not spend a whole bunch of time here because it's fairly self-explanatory and I think we all know them quite well. But the good news is that purchase data is not predominantly cookie-based, so these segments will be fairly unaffected. Now, what we'll do now is we'll just unpack a few and show you what purchase signals are being captured by what providers. On the purchase side of things, you've got Cartology and MasterCard, which is based on Woolies data and MasterCard purchase data respectively. You've then got your financial data, which is more of your Experians and Quantiums, which is based on Westpac personal financial data, and Quantium now being based on CommBank financial data. As we all know, these are super high performing segments, which are heavily used by that FMCG, retail, e-com, travel, and auto vertical. And in terms of access points, you very much need to have direct relationships with these guys as the majority of these players, so that you can receive their data and have it ingested into your DSPs. And in some cases, you even need to run through contractual processes just to connect those pipes. Now, what's great about it is that it's very deterministic as it's based on those financial data and purchase data signals. Where to watch out is that it can lack scale in some areas, and the data costs are relatively expensive due to the high accuracy of those data sets. Now, purchase data is generally used a little lower down the funnel due to it being more product or vertical specific. These are usually for the faster moving products. So where you're looking to target very high intent consumers, generally with a really more pointed CTA. Examples are FMCG and travel. You've then got the personal financial data side of things, which can be used in a slightly different way. Like, for example, you might use it to build brand against a high net worth audience, or for purchase decisions that take a little longer to make. So to that point, think home loans, cars, or luxury goods. Now, as our industry's evolved, so two of the channels that we access and how we target consumers on them, to the point where we now have some channels available to us that are not really dependent on cookie information at all. So I'll chuck you back over to Ryan to cover this one.
Cheers, Sam. Yeah, so as Sam mentioned, like, our consumption of digital media has expanded, and so too have the environments that we actually consume that media in. For example, where desktop browser became web browser, became in-app, became smart TV, and so on. And as these new environments evolved, the cookie became more and more obsolete. I mean, you can ask yourself, was that a potential catalyst for the cookie's demise? Maybe not. So if you think about it, right, first programmatic channels were reliant on cookies. That's your standard displays, video, and native. They're the big main channels in this case. It was the rise of mobile app that was the first kind of major shift away from traditional cookie targeting. So in-app environments like audio, they don't support cookies whatsoever. Device IDs kind of became the standard there. Then BVOD came along. That uses household identifiers. If you're watching on a smart TV, or your device ID if you're watching on a mobile device. Neither of these are dependent on cookies. And then lastly, you've got programmatic outdoor. Now, outdoor, as we all know, one of the oldest forms of advertising and considered one of the most premium. This doesn't require cookies whatsoever, and is super highly rated for building brands. So when you look at this from the top down, there's not really any downsides here. You've got three really scalable channels that are not dependent on cookies whatsoever. And all three, BVOD, audio, and outdoor, are super high impact and seriously premium media channels. So actually the last thing to point out, and I actually think it's probably the most interesting part about it, is the digitization of those three channels that we've just mentioned. It disrupted the entire media industry. So traditionally those channels were reserved for those tier one brands, millions of marketing dollars, and now they're way, way more accessible. The barriers were totally broken down, and it allows us to buy this media. There's no minimum spends, no huge planning cycles, and without the publisher buys. It was a huge, huge change in the industry.
Sweet. So I guess now we've kind of covered off all of those major cookieless audience targeting options. So the whole purpose there was to really give you that snapshot and pinpoint playbook for a post-cookie ecosystem. And the good news is that everything that we've discussed can really be used across your entire campaigns, no matter the objective. So whether that's building brand, consideration, or action, with some providers being more suited to specific objectives than others, as you can kind of see on this slide. Now, if we look at the platforms with first-party data specifically, you could use that throughout the entire funnel. You could use Google data for awareness, you could use social for engagement, and you could use Amazon for the direct response piece, for example. Now, these can be actioned now, and they're available to access within all of the major DSPs. So we strongly suggest that you start to familiarize yourself with each, and then begin testing them so that you can prepare yourself moving forward. It's really a great guide just to help you get started with your strategies, and then begin developing that framework.
Thank you, guys. That's the first part of the session finished. So just to reiterate what I'm hearing from you both, and to lead us into the final part of the session, all about testing, all about diversification, understanding what the impact is on what you're currently doing, building a strategy that incorporates most, if not all, of the solutions we've spoken about today, and using them in unison as part of an overarching strategy. I know, Sam, that you and your team have been busy over the last year, as I said earlier, working through what all of this means for us and for our customers, and you've been testing solutions. So I'm delighted to introduce everyone to Jess from Integral Ad Science, who's been working with Sam and the guys here, and will now share some of our findings and results, some of the case studies we've been doing with these guys over the last few months.
Thanks, Esther and the Bench team. We are thrilled to be here today with your team to run through some of these great case studies on contextual targeting. At IAS, our bread and butter has been media quality and verification, but since last year, we've made a significant investment in the deployment of advanced contextual capabilities for advertisers and publishers. This has enabled us to address concerns around targeting in a cookieless world. The bench team have done a brilliant job at articulating the different options available in the market once cookies are deprecated. And it's clear to see that the changes to regulation and the changes on how targeting is achieved is both an opportunity and a challenge. It's unsurprising that online privacy is now more than ever a very important topic to consumers when it comes to browsing online. One targeting opportunity that has been explored today is contextual targeting. And IAS ran a recent Australian study to understand how the suitability of ad environments impact consumer brand perceptions. Overwhelmingly, the responses shown here demonstrate that the suitability of an environment directly impacts receptivity and memorability of the ads, as well as the favorability towards the associated brands. It's clear that the impact of content and context on the consumer is significant. I'm excited that we can now match these survey results with actual campaign data to understand how contextual targeting can be used effectively to drive great results for brands and advertisers. Today, the team shared a detailed explanation on contextual targeting. So I've included some examples of the most commonly used targeting segments split into 4 buckets: seasonal, vertical, topical, and audience proxy. The IAS team, in partnership with the bench team, leveraged targeting selections from these buckets across a variety of campaigns, and we have selected 3 of those campaigns to showcase to you today.
Well, cheers, Jess. So the challenge of what we were looking to achieve, first of all, it obviously stems from the fact that cookies will not be around for much longer. And then secondly, led to us researching and exploring different options. And one of those options was obviously these newly developed IAS contextual segments. So what we did was we ran a head-to-head test looking at contextual segments versus more traditional cookie-based targeting. And we did so across a range of verticals, and also did so looking at a number of different measures of success throughout the funnel. So we looked at things like completion rate for the awareness activity through to clicks and direct response for that lower funnel activity. Now, quite interestingly, a personal anecdote here is that I hypothesize that we might see comparable performance, maybe even slightly less cost-efficient performance to more traditional targeting. So I'm really excited for Jess to show you some of these results. Now, the first case that we tested was for an air conditioning client of ours. As you can see on the slide here, the core audience that we were looking to target were consumers that were looking at replacing or upgrading the units in their home, or consumers who have concerns regarding air quality. And this led us to targeting different cookie-based segments and really looking to hone in on the value that IAS could provide by finding similar proxies. We tested a hay fever segment and a pollution segment against more traditional cookie-based targeting.
This head-to-head test generated some really fantastic results that really showcase the power of contextual targeting. As Sam mentioned, this advertiser leveraged a combination of seasonal and topical segments focused on hay fever and pollution content. They drove increased relevancy by choosing content with a positive sentiment. When comparing contextual targeting results to the third-party audience targeting, contextual drove stronger performance results with a 21% increase in click-through rate, combined with greater cost efficiency, driving a 23% decrease in the cost per 1,000 impressions and a 36% decrease in a cost per click. This proves that not only can media buyers reduce their reliance on third-party cookies, they can even improve on efficiency and performance at the same time.
Yeah, totally agreed with that last line. Now, next up was a charity. Their business objective here was, interestingly, to drive sales on their website. So we're shifting the needle a little bit from reach and engagement through to direct response when compared to the previous case. Now, again, we used IAS segments as a proxy for audience segmentation. So this time looking at consumers that were frequent shoppers and sustainability focused.
Thanks, Sam. Being able to drive performance and efficiency for a business, especially when it's a charitable organization, is a great win. This charity leveraged topical targeting segments to reach their ideal audience, and they drove performance and efficiency with our contextual targeting. In this campaign, there was a significant decrease in the cost per acquisition rate when compared with third-party targeting of 19%. Contextual targeting is typically thought of as a brand awareness tool, as the conversation between the advertiser and their consumers is one-to-many versus one-to-one, which is typically how cookie-based targeting is leveraged. Therefore, contextual targeting is not the first tool that a performance marketer reaches for to drive better performance metrics. This is a great example of how contextual targeting can drive better performance metrics and can drive more efficient acquisitions. What this highlights is that how important relevancy is when it comes to advertising. And this result really mirrors the IAS Power of Context results, where Australians stated that they are more likely to engage with contextually relevant ads.
Yeah. Now, the final case that we looked at here was against a tertiary education client of ours who have traditionally used super heavy audience-based targeting strategies to target undergrad, to target postgrad, as well as that to target mature age students. Now, this campaign is the one that's a little bit more awareness focused, in which we're looking at video completion rate as one of the measures of success.
This is a great campaign to wrap up with today. This educational institution leveraged both topical and vertical segments with back to school and education to drive results. This university was able to generate an increase in completion rate by 10% when compared with third-party audience targeting segments. And this really demonstrates that a quality consumer in the right mindset is more likely to be positively impacted by contextually relevant advertisement. We've had some great examples of how contextual targeting can be leveraged to drive similar, if not better, results than the traditional cookie-based targeting approach. Each campaign that we've run through today has used a combination of different contextual targeting segments to achieve greater performance and efficiency. What today's examples have shown is that contextual targeting is a suitable alternative to leveraging third-party data, and we've seen today that it is applicable to both brand and performance campaigns. In the first campaign, the advertiser cleverly aligned the brand message with our pollution targeting segment. However, they ensured they were appearing against content with positive sentiment. Sentiment and emotion are key differentiators of contextual targeting now versus in the past. Leveraging this sophisticated technology ensures that you select the sentiment that is right for your brand and your message to drive increased relevancy. Finally, it's clear to see that across all three examples, key performance and efficiency indicators were improved. We are fortunate to work with great partners like Bench that are really driving the conversation around a cookieless world, and I hope you found these case studies useful and insightful. I definitely encourage everyone here today to start harnessing the power of contextual targeting. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Jess. And thanks to everyone for tuning in today. I do hope you found it useful. As I said at the start, we're going to be running some cookieless auditing sessions for attendees. It'll be a 30-minute one-on-one virtual discovery session where we'll review your current approach, your data strategy, media channels, and all of your objectives, and provide you with some recommendations to prepare you for the future of targeting without the cookie. And happy to, start testing in and around that as well. We'll be sending a follow-up email for everyone that's joined the call today, where you can book your meeting with us directly. But again, if you've got any questions or anything you want to chat to us about, it's a workshop at benchmedia.com. And as I said, we've seen a couple of questions come through. We'll respond to those in the next 24 hours. And that's us done, guys. I think we're 2 minutes early, which is amazing. So thanks again for joining, and have a great day.